All right, today we had the privilege of having Derek Wavering from KFSE Engineers up in LA in the office and had a good chat with him on a lot of different industry-related topics, new systems that they're looking into. He had a lot of good nuggets of wisdom to bring to the table for custom homeowners who are looking to build their custom home, also developers, and really great conversation with him. I feel like there's a lot of value that he brought to the table, and we'll get right to it. Hope you guys enjoy. Well, Derek, thanks for making the drive down. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always good to come down to Orange County.
Yeah.
Actually, when I graduated college, I wanted to come to Orange County. It was the first place I wanted to come to. I want to be by the ocean, surf every day, and just do structural engineering.
It's not a bad place, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go and just kind of dive right in and maybe tell us a little bit about KFSE and talk about your background and professional experience, so we can get right into it.
Yeah, so I first started my journey in structural engineering. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is a great school up north. Had an incredible structural engineering department, really like hands-on doing, very dedicated like department there, and is one of the greatest places to like kind of live and go to college. It's actually rated by Time Magazine as the 4th happiest place in the world.
Nice.
So I wanted to stay there after college, but I got a lot of offers around California, and LA was probably like the last place I wanted to go. Orange County being the first place I wanted to go. But I got a great offer at this firm called Nabi Youssef and Associates that works on like a lot of high-rise and like prominent structures in LA.
Right.
So they do a lot of like hotels, hospitals, office buildings, and so it was a really intriguing firm. And I went there, and my first project I had there was the renovation and restoration of the Hollywood Palladium, which is like this, iconic concert and event venue inside Hollywood.
Oh, yeah.
And, like they've had like, presidential candidate, like speeches there or events there. The Rat Pack would hang out there. That was like their spot. They hang out all the time back in the day. So it had a lot of history to it. So it was a really cool project to work on. And what they wanted to do was raise the stage height to give more room for speakers. So we have these like 120-foot wood bowstring trusses.
Okay.
It's like kind of curved shape for the top of the roof and the bottom chord. And our job was to cut these wood trusses in half and sandwich steel trusses for the rest of the truss to create like an upslope to give more stage height.
Got it.
Above there. And it's kind of these Frankenstein trusses. And so this is my first project when I was like 23. And it probably didn't have too much management oversight on that.
Okay.
So, going out to the site and watching them crane these huge steel trusses in and attach them to the existing wood trusses. And like the first night, like Jay-Z was opening right underneath our truss, and like 5,000 people underneath it.
Talk about pressure.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. I was like 23 years old, my first project. And, still gives me anxiety to this day, but it's been going strong for about 13 years now.
That's funny. Those are almost the better ones when you just get thrown into the fire and you have to figure it out, and you're going to make mistakes, and then, that's how you learn the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And like definitely like in opening our own firm, that's how we learn. Just kind of get thrown into the fire. You have to always have the answer. So it's meticulously research, when we first opened our firm. Obviously there's a lot to know in our industry, a lot of industry standards. There's meticulously researching.
So what year was that?
So I began in Nabi Youssef in 2007. So we started right before the recession hit and worked on these really cool projects that never got built because of the recession.
Yeah.
I remember there's one in downtown LA on Bixel Street, and it was like two 16-story towers, and they were connected by 10 stories at the top. So 6 stories underneath, like this connected portion of the structure.
Yeah.
It was just, just open to the ground. And, you had these 16-story structures, and you create like this Varendale frame out of concrete connecting the two and how they would act together. Really cool project. That was probably one of my favorite projects, but never got built.
Big expansion gaps as the kind of bridge hits the buildings, I bet.
Oh, we couldn't have expansion gaps, not with that one. So they had to be tight. They had to act together.
Ah, okay.
And definitely have some projects kind of like that similar recently too. Very interesting, complicated structures. But yeah, also worked with Frank Geary on a project. When I worked at Nabi Youssef Associates, we did the Grand Avenue development, which is about a 30-story tower Really cool project, but that one never got built either. So
Talk about challenging, though. You have to deal with all the kind of curvature of the surfaces and, I mean, was it a pretty formal building that was proposed?
it was actually more of a formal building. Yeah, it was part of two buildings, and the other one was like a curving tower.
Okay.
A lot more interesting building. That one's like 60 stories, but we were on this 30-story building. It's still definitely an interesting project. And then just other projects as well, like the Broad Museum. Did some work on that. Not
Nice.
the predominant amount of work, but it was so cool to be a part of, that really iconic structure in downtown LA.
Very
And other stuff like, have you ever been to the Perch restaurant in downtown LA?
That's the roof deck, right?
Yeah, the roof deck. Yeah. So I worked on that.
Okay.
And did the Perch restaurant, which is always cool when your friends go there. You could show them some of your work. And
I used to live right down there, so that's funny.
Oh, you did? You lived in downtown?
Yeah,
I didn't know
on
that.
Figueroa and Pico.
Figueroa
Right
and
across
Pico.
the street from LA Live.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you like the South Park?
Yeah.
When did you live there?
Gosh, that's when I first moved out there when I was about 19.
You're 9.
I was
Okay,
working
so
in downtown LA.
oh, when you're going to USC and then working in downtown.
Well, UCLA.
Oh, UCLA.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What year was it when you guys started Kurt Fisher?
We started Kurt Fisher. That was 2013.
Okay.
So Kurt actually interviewed me first at Nabi at one of my first interviews. He interviewed me with Nabi, and then in around 2013 he broke off and started his own firm. And shortly after, he reached out to me and was like, made me an offer for partnership.
Wow.
And it's like, it'd be really cool to go create something like of your own and maybe do some things differently. You always have a lot of ideas on how we can do things differently. And so just hopped on that, and we started with there's three of us. There's me, Kurt, and one other colleague, and we were out in Agora Hills.
Okay.
And we had 150 square foot office. You could hardly turn your chairs around in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And so very humble beginnings. And then, it's just a lot of work. And over the last 8 years, we've grown to 24 people and engineers and administrative staff.
Wow.
And so, it's been a huge learning process along the way. And it's I never got a degree in business or,
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the more challenging things too, is you get to wear all these different hats when you start your own firm, and just learning. And in terms of the business aspects, it's a little bit more trial and error. Definitely not structural engineering, but in terms of business, yeah. And just remember you getting this first project, a 10-unit apartment building, and we worked on large projects, commercial projects in Abu Yusuf, and we were so excited getting this 10-unit apartment, and then just seeing how the projects just grow and grow and grow, and getting larger projects and more interesting projects.
Once people see that you can do one project, they trust you, and that just kind of spirals into more.
Yeah. And so our motto is you're only as good as your last project.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you did before.
Yeah.
It matters what you're doing now. So with that motto, we've just always kind of gone off referrals. And we haven't really done any marketing. So we kind of just naturally have grown just, by working with our clients and, letting them know how we work and working well together.
That's great. I think that's the best type of marketing, though, referrals, because then it's not like you're getting people from online or something like that. I think the relationships are much more stable when you're getting referrals.
Absolutely. So. And I'm not really good at marketing, so it's just I just do it well, and
that's right. Yeah.
Easiest way to grow for us.
Have you heard there's a saying that I think it was Bjarke Ingels, he's a famous architect, and he said there's a conundrum with architecture, and this applies to structural engineering too, but he's saying nobody will give you a project until you have a built building. And nobody will let you build a building until you've built a building, right? Uh-huh. So it's you've got to have that first person to give you your first project and put trust in you. And that's an amazing amount of trust to give to somebody.
Not even that, even someone that's worked with you and maybe they're working on a larger project or in a new sector. Yeah. But they trust the way that you work, and they give you all that trust. And they say, even if you haven't worked on a project in this sector, we'll figure it out together. Right. We have the team in place to work together to figure it out. And we see that happen sometimes. They just put the trust in the relationship.
That's huge. Yeah. So now what's your kind of, what the majority of projects you're working on? Are they residential? Are they commercial? What's the kind of division?
Yeah, mostly residential. I love residential. I love creating habitats for people. And we also do shoring engineering. So when we first started about 6 years ago, it's kind of really, you can coordinate it well in-house with structure. So you want to shore for an excavation,
Definitely.
support the excavation while you're going down below grade. And so it's just very simple, like statics and mechanics, very simple structure. And we just got into that. When we get into something, we just research it as much as possible. We call contractors, talk to contractors about it, try to find cost efficiencies, and done about over 100 shoring projects now.
That's funny. I've worked with structural engineers in the past where we did have to have shoring in the project, right? Mm-hmm. And we said, well, can you guys just do the shoring? They said, no, we've got to hire out a third-party company to do that. I always found that disjunction a little bit odd. It's like,
and it's really just structural engineering. It's simple like statics and mechanics and just materials.
Yeah.
So it's something as a structural engineer you can learn very easily. It's like we have one book. Like, well, what's the best book? Read it, and talk to all these contractors, and became very good at shoring engineering.
Nice. So as far as the role of a structural engineer on a project, I know you and I kind of know what you guys do versus what the architect does, but a lot of our clients that come to us and a lot of people on the outside, they don't really, that division is not so clear for them, right? Mm-hmm. Can you go into it and talk a little bit about what your specific scope as a structural engineer would be and kind of where it ends?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I say about 98% of the people I meet outside of the building industry have no idea what we do.
Yeah.
And some of my close friends still don't know what I do.
Yeah.
It's a very elusive discipline. But basically what we do as a structural engineer is that we design the structure that you really can't see. It's kind of like hidden behind all the finishes that make sure the building stands and that it's safe and stable for its occupancy use. And so, we have to design the structure to resist forces. And there's two different types of forces. There's vertical or gravity forces. Then we also have lateral forces. So the gravity forces, there's two different types. There's dead loads, which is kind of like a remorse term. I don't know why that ever came up.
Yeah.
But dead loads, which is like, the weight, permanent elements inside the building, like the weight of the finishes or the structure itself. That's always there. And then we have live loads, which are transient loads. So it's like, people walking around using the space, furniture in the space, that's transient. So we have to design for that gravity system. And some of the elements that resist that gravity system are like joists, beams, walls, and posts, bearing walls, which you're probably familiar with that term.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone. So then there's also the lateral system. That's where we get into the fun stuff, especially in California, where, you have this huge seismic region. So you get lateral forces from earthquakes.
Right.
And that's like a predominantly important part of our design to make sure that, the building's safe. And so some of the elements that resist these lateral forces, either being seismic or wind, are walls, which we call shear walls in the building. And also we have frame systems. So we use like a frame systems when we need like an open space, and it can resist lateral force but provide a lot of open space that the architect is looking for, the owner's looking for. So those are the types of the systems there for that. So it's kind of something like where I kind of always relate it to like kind of like the human body, where like the architect designs like what you're going to look like with your skin, your color, your skin, everything like that. And then like the structural engineer, like we design the bones that hold you up, your muscles, your skeletal system that keep you walking, keep you moving. And then like the MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing kind of designs like, your nervous system that like keeps you functioning. So it's kind of an analogy I put it sometimes.
That's a good way to put it. That's interesting. Yeah.
And I think of like the owner or the developer is like, like kind of like the financier or whatever, to make everything happen. You may consider them God, and that's an analogy.
Yeah. That's funny. That's a good little lesson for, let's call it structural engineering students or even architectural students, to just get a breakdown like that of what you guys do. And that's helpful for the clients to understand that. Often clients will come to us and say, where does the structural scope end? And then where do the architects, as the architect coming in and take it over from there? Mm-hmm. And I like that. We're kind of doing the skin, and we're also, we look at the bone structure too, because that bone structure helps inform what the building is going to look like. Also, if we have exposed structural components in there. Mm-hmm. Not so great of an analogy to think of a bone being exposed, but they get the point.
So yeah, one thing I want to add to that in terms of our role is like we're really like one really important thing is to obviously keep you safe. That's the most important thing. But another really part of our role is to make the architect has a vision of what they want this building to look like, how the shape they want it to take. And our role is to make sure that we make that happen, that we can make their vision happen. And so you get some really interesting challenges on how to make these shapes work. But, everyone always asks us, like, oh, can we make that happen? But we can make anything happen depending on how much money you have.
Yeah.
But we're always trying to be as cost effective as we can. We got to stay within budget. So it's like trying to do it in a very cost effective way. And what we'll have to do is go back to the architect and be like, okay, this vision's great. This is how we can do it. But maybe we can provide some more economical or value engineering alternatives. Like, what if we place a column here? Can that work with your design? And save the owner a lot of money to keep to the vision, but also be cost effective.
Sure. And so that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, with other structural engineering firms, economy and cost of construction is not, I think, as important as I feel that you guys, or it doesn't get the level of importance that you guys kind of put on it. Some guys will just say, hey, yeah, I can make this happen, and they'll specify something in the structural engineering drawings that's just it. I mean, we're trying to push the envelope architecturally, but they specify something in the structural drawings that makes that happen, but it's also super expensive, right?
Yeah.
And there may be a more economical way to achieve that, but that's not even on their radar, which I find that's unfortunate. I like that you guys do that, and I think that adds a huge amount of value to the client, right? Especially if it's a developer client who's trying to kind of keep costs in check and keep the pro forma in check. So that was something I appreciate about you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, we like to do that early in design, which is like the early design, schematic design phase, where you're kind of laying out the system.
Yeah.
And we provide like these value engineering options they can look at. And that's really an important part of our design process. You don't want to just rush through a project or just put something out there. Like, we're always looking at how to make the project better. And in terms of providing value engineering input, we kind of had to take the role of an architect ourselves. As the architect takes the role, needs to know a lot about structural engineering to lay out an efficient building that's and within budget and cost effective. So when we're proposing like a value engineering option, we got to think of how's this going to affect the architecture? Is this something that we think the architect is going to like?
Sure.
Will it fit well within the architecture? And it's something we haven't had really formal training, and we're like, we think this will look good.
Yeah.
And we run it by you. And after doing that for so long, you kind of get a better feel for architects. And there's sometimes where we won't suggest a value engineering option because it's going to affect the architecture a lot. So we try to keep it play with our suggestions until what we think will work with the architect.
Yeah, that's important. You kind of know a profile for the architect that you're working with and the aesthetic of the building, and you keep that in the back of your mind through the process, which is really interesting. A lot of engineers, it's not a consideration for them, right? Which is unfortunate, And I find that also with MEP engineers too. A lot of these guys will come into a building and they'll look at it from a functional standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And which is great. Obviously, you need that. But they'll propose drop soffits and main living spaces, right, to run ducts through. And that's, that just kind of, when we find engineers, both MEP and structural, that consider aesthetics along with functionality, that's when we say, all right, we want to continue to use these guys, right?
Yeah.
Because we know that they've always got that in the back of their head, which is really interesting.
Yeah, MEP engineer, they want to come up with the best system. They want you to give the best feel in the house. And then like sometimes that system, the best system or cost-effective system, it may not work as well. You may have to do drop soffit to get this larger size duct that will provide a better circulation or get that return or supply somewhere.
Yeah.
But maybe it doesn't work with the architecture as well. And you got to like have that understanding. So it's a really collaborative effort. It's really important.
It's a dance.
It's a dance.
Yeah. So as far as biggest hurdles that you guys have, or let's call it you individually, have seen on your projects or the projects that you've been involved with, what do you feel are some of the biggest obstacles that you've had to overcome, and maybe some of the areas that you've figured out, hey, I shouldn't do this on the next one, or hey, we need to avoid doing it this way on the next project? What are kind of some of those learning lessons for you guys?
Yeah, I'll give some a couple specific examples, but then talk about it more generally, where a lot of the hurdles are in terms of any kind of recess or penetration in the structure. Especially with MEP, you'll get some MEP designs that are just taking out almost an entire section of your beam, and you have to coordinate. Well, can we go to a flatter, wider duct, and we can get that penetration through the beam, or there's recesses within the architectural that we need to account for, like shade pockets that go into the structural engineering. And making sure that everything is coordinated is extremely important for the project. Like, we want a coordinated set to go out to the contractor so everything can be built as per plan. Like, the architecture works with the structure and the MEP. We have those openings for the MEP shafts like noted in our plan. They know that we've already analyzed for them. And so it's really important to have a coordinated set so that the contractor doesn't need to come back to us for a revision. And when they do, that could possibly require a change order, which will cost the owner money.
Sure.
Or it could cause a delay by need to send that revision back into plan check, and now they have to wait, and that might affect their critical path and the span of the project. So it's really, really important to have a coordinated set. And the way that we tackle that is that every single time we come up with a new coordination issue, we're gonna look at that issue and figure out, okay, what are the solutions for that issue, and try to pick the best possible solution. And then we record that, so we keep like a living document for like the different sectors that we're in. So if like our custom residence, we have this coordination document, like a template with all the coordination items we've ever come across. And so when we're doing our schematic design and we provide that to the architect with like maybe our cost suggestions to our value engineering options, we'll also provide like all of our questions or comments that we look at that coordination list and like what applies to this project. And we want to coordinate as soon as we can in the design process, because that will avoid rework in the future and having to do revisions. I find that when things get revised a lot, you have to create revisions in the future. A lot of the times that's kind of pushed into a schedule, and sometimes it's not spent as much focus as then when you're like in the design intense stages. You're working strongly through schematic design for multiple weeks. So we try to push all that coordination early in the process as we can.
Nice. Yeah, we kind of do something similar. We call it lessons learned. So we do a Monday morning meeting, and
we have the exact same thing.
Yeah,
we have like, who has a lesson learned?
Exactly, and that's it. It's, you have to have courage to kind of bring that up, because everybody's sitting in the conference room, and you put the hurdles that you've overcome, let's call it in the previous week, you put them out on the table, right? And it's helpful for the younger people in the office to kind of see those, and then you can begin to predict those based upon the project type, right? If it's custom home, you can say, okay, for example, I need to look at where my beam penetrations are going to be, right? Like you're saying, I need to look at, hey, can my shade pockets fit at this location, or are we going to need to, notch out a massive 18-inch hole in a beam, right? Which is not going to be possible. So I think that's a great practice for both you guys and us.
Yeah, and like one thing to add on to that is like we want to record that. We those lessons learned, we want to record them, have them in a location, and that's really good for young junior staff to like go through that coordination document and see like what's important when you need to coordinate. They can review it and they can talk to the project manager about it and address that. And it's really a good learning opportunity for people. And as well as, like I said, like we have like 8,000 pages of code to know, industry standards, many different materials, and like you need to keep a list of like what you've learned already to make sure we don't like old saying you don't repeat what you did in the past or something.
Yeah, your old mistakes. Yeah. So beam penetrations, to get specific again, beam penetrations, locations of shade pockets, and what would you say? Any other big learning experiences?
Just probably not more impactful, but like recesses of sliders.
Yes.
Making sure the structure accommodate those recesses of sliders. General coordination with the architecture. I call it architectural constraints. I don't want to say you're constraining us, but you have
a nice way to put it.
The floor depth. How is the shape of this architecture forming, and like how do we fit our structure within that architecture? Like we can't have a beam that's below all the other beams when we're trying to attach a ceiling to it, and then it affects the ceiling height. Right. So we really got to look at all that and see like how we can fit our structure to keep the building safe when it's inside this architectural envelope. And if we need to modify that for economy, then we talk with you about it. Yeah. Say like, can we get deeper beams? Can we lower the ceiling? We don't want to, but maybe it's more cost effective.
Yeah, and I know one of the tools that you guys use to vet those issues is obviously BIM, right? It's just kind of a no-brainer. And in our projects, we always love to work with the engineers that use BIM, right? Because we can integrate our models and we can see these collisions that are happening. We can see where beams need to be dropped, where we need to do penetrations for ducts and things like that. So that's another thing that was when we were working with. Well, that would have been the first project we ever worked with you guys on. Since then, we've done 3 houses and 1 commercial office space with you guys. But the first project we did we both used BIM, right? And the HVAC contractor used BIM too. And it was a great experience, right? And I think we always try to push our office to continue to require our consultants to use BIM because it's just such an invaluable tool.
Yeah, I think
the process.
BIM is one of the best tools that's helped our whole industry. Recently, like in the last 10, 15 years, it's incredible coordination tool. The fact that we can look at this 3D model, understand a lot better. We can take a section cut anywhere in the model and, see how our structure would have to fit within those architectural constraints.
Yeah.
And we, like all of our junior staff, every time we're doing a detail, we tell them, no matter what you think is happening, sometimes you think it might be like kind of more of a typical condition, still cut the model, see if you're missing anything. Look how the architecture shape is taken and how we fit our structure within it.
Yeah.
And it's been such a great tool. Like we only worked with, we started our firm 8 years ago, and we only worked in Revit. We did one project in AutoCAD. I wish we didn't do that project, so we're going to say we haven't done any projects in AutoCAD.
Yeah.
And that's why we never did another one again, is because it's such a great tool. So having the whole team on BIM is very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost at this point, you almost feel cliche saying, oh, BIM this, BIM that, because it's such kind of widely used in the industry. But I'm surprised always at the amount of engineers that come to us or that we work with that are still in CAD, and oftentimes, I mean, if it's a pretty complex building, there's movement happening in the floor plates and things, we'll have our younger staff come in and model the structural model based upon if we get CAD engineering plans, we'll produce the BIM model for that, just for our sakes, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that takes 2 days or so, but it is well worth producing that.
Yeah. And definitely to speak towards the clients and how it even goes further is that with BIM, you could do cost estimating in BIM. You can do like quantity takeoffs.
Yep.
Where you get all instantly calculate all the, board feet of lumber that you have inside your project for cost takeoff. And you take it much further where if you're, developing your details in BIM to a higher degree, you can create fabrication drawings. So it needs to be used for shop drawings to fabricate your steel. And so that's where the direction that the industry is going. And we're advancing into that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some developers or sophisticated developers almost expect that now. They'll come to us and they'll say, well, can I get a cost takeoff on the amount of exterior stone on the outside of a house, right? And we're able to do that for you. But I feel like 5 years ago, that was not a common thing for a developer to ask. But now they know that the tool is available and how easy it is to do a couple clicks, and we can generate that for them. So that's been kind of interesting.
Yeah, and then just giving the model to the contractor for them help to understand the structure more. I mean, these are 3D spaces, 3D connections. It's hard to understand on a 2D plan sometimes.
Right.
So it's just so much more informative.
It's another thing though.
Specs that you can put into which are amazing.
It's another thing if the contractor actually uses that though.
I am surprised. I will say I'm surprised that with all the Revit models we create, how often they're actually used by the construction team, are used for those higher purposes.
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, it's the last few years it's coming more into play where we're getting more requests for quantity takeoffs. And that's really interesting. We like being a part of it.
Yeah. We've had a couple projects where you show the contractor kind of how to use the model, how to spin around it and stuff like that. And we find them looking at the model more than they're actually looking at the 2D construction drawings, which is, I'm glad they're doing it, but still the construction documents remain they have precedence over that model. So it's kind of an interesting, we're in this really weird interstitial space right now. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. I mean, well, even now, models are becoming almost the construction documents where some even plan check agencies, jurisdictions, they'll accept the model as the drawings. Yeah. And they'll review the model instead of actually 2D drawings, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in the future, there's going to be a time where we are submitting and we're only working in model, and the contractor has control of the model, but we're as engineers and architects, MEP, all of our kind of project team, we're building the most realistic model that we can possibly build, and I think it'll be evolved to where we're no longer producing 2D drawings.
Yeah.
Which is a really kind of fascinating thing to think about, building a building that way.
Yeah, and definitely and easily incorporating that with virtual reality with those BIM models, and having contractors on the site be able to look at the connection in virtual reality. And even some of our software now is going to virtual reality, our shoring design software. You can put on virtual reality headset and look at the shoring system and see how the connections are going together when we're designing it. So make sure that everything is lining up correctly, and what those connections are doing.
So that's a good segue to what I wanted to talk about next, as far as industry advancements. What do you guys see in the structural engineering world as kind of the next step of technologies or advanced materials that are kind of slowly working their way into the field?
Yeah, so one that we talked about already is BIM, which has been incredible help, but kind of more specific, which are really affecting some sectors, is volumetric modular construction. And that's been around since, the early 1900s, where you're doing a lot of mobile homes that are like built in a factory and taken to the site. But now it's that like industry is really growing. We're doing a lot of multifamily residences that is out of these volumetric modules. So these volumetric modules, there's like boxes that are created inside the factory to higher standards. You have a lot more control there. And, these factories can work 24/7 instead of a site you can work, like 10, 12 hours a day.
Right.
So these modules use like 14 by 70, and they'll have like a full unit inside of them. Say it's an apartment unit, all right? And they'll have like maybe the two within a 14 by 70 module connected by a hallway. And these are turnkey modules, and they're really, really good quality builds. And so you'll be shipping these, boxes to the site, and then stacking these boxes side by side and then up on top of each other. And we'll be stacking these wood boxes up to 5 stories. And you imagine just a bunch of boxes. Have you ever seen like a container ship that has all the boxes stacked and they get hit by a wave and they fall over?
Yeah.
Well, it's all a job to make sure that when the earthquake comes, they don't fall over like that ship. So we had to. It's really important for us, to make the connections between the modules. For seismic forces and gravity forces. And there's like this recent report called the McKinsey report, where they're an institution that kind of advised to different businesses and different sectors, all like in many different areas of the economy. And they issued a report on modular construction on how much it's going to grow. And there's really a lot of huge institutions that are putting money behind it, like PIMCO, Amazon. A lot of big institutions that aren't even really in the building industry are seeing like how this is going to help our housing crisis, and just to help affordable housing in the future. And it's going to be one of the biggest changes to affordable housing, if you read that report. And one thing that's really cool about it is that I toured a factory in Boise. I went up there, visited 3 different factories, and some factories are starting to use automated like robot arms and tooling heads to create these modules. They're trying to bring the cost down for affordable housing. And just walking through there and seeing these big robot arms, putting together floors, putting together walls, attaching them together, mudding and taping even the drywall. Like really precise kind of, really precise labor. It's really interesting seeing that together, and it's really going to bring the price of housing down.
Yeah, talk about being able to work 24/7 though. I mean, if you've got a 5-axis arm doing that, those things can be on all day.
They'll be on all day, and then you just ship them to the site.
Yeah. And
it's a really interesting part that we've done a few projects in, and we keep researching and meeting with manufacturers and getting to know more about it. And I always love learning new things. Like I like a variety. I had a variety in my early career, and still want more of a variety now. So it's fun learning those new things.
Yeah, and being able to offer those different construction types and systems to the clients, right, as maybe a more efficient or a more time efficient or cost efficient way to execute a project. I mean, that's huge. If you can kind of think outside the box, you have exposure to these different things and say, hey, let's try this on your project, right?
Yeah.
What I find interesting about that is you're able to offer those different types of solutions to the clients. And I think that's really invaluable if you're exposed to all those different, methods and materials, all that can really bring a lot of value to the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like right now, it's kind of like there's kind of labor shortages in construction. Or if you're building in an area that doesn't have much labor or has a lot of like union labor, it's very expensive to build for like what the community can afford. The modular is very, very beneficial in those areas. And most of it's multifamily and hotels and workforce housing. But also they've been doing custom residences and modulars for years and years now, and it's even becoming more popular as we've seen it. So doing modulars and custom residence is very interesting. Custom residences are usually a lot more kind of unique, take a lot of different shapes. It's not as uniform, but still being used a lot. And you've seen a lot of panelized just walls and roof systems and kind of like a kit apart houses.
Right.
Company that we're working with right now. That's really, really interesting.
So we're working on, a fair amount of our projects are becoming these accessory dwelling units, right? With the new legislation that came in 2019. we've just been kind of inundated with these projects. So we have a little group kind of dedicated to those. But what we've been working and experimenting with is prefabricated metal steel framing systems. So, and then we're working with a company that they pre-dimple, pre-cut these metal steel trusses, or these metal steel frames, light gauge metal frames, and in the factory they can assemble them and ship them to the site in California, or they can just flat stack all the studs on a truck and then ship the flat stack studs out to California for a couple guys to assemble in a day. But what I find that really interesting, this company also they do prefabricated bathrooms. So
that's a huge one.
It's a big one, and these things come out to site. All the finishes are in it. It's just kind of unbelievable how finished they are inside, and they just stack them in hotels,
they're
multifamily.
Turnkey. Actually, what they do, like on these modular projects, they put like scanners and locks on the doors because they're so turnkey.
Yeah.
They don't want anyone from the general contracting team going in there and maybe like making scuffs or anything because they're so dialed in, they're so complete. Yeah. And then they actually have to lock them up.
Yeah, no, it's this. This particular company that we're working with, they kind of started in that arena, and they're I'd say growing, or they're becoming more interested in doing full ADUs. So we're talking 500 square foot ADUs, 800 square foot ADUs, up to 1,000 square foot, 1,200 square foot ADUs. So I feel like there's definitely a kind of a moment of change that we're going to see and are seeing right now. It's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. So that's it's a good way in terms of solving the housing crisis and making things more affordable.
Yeah.
And with the automation, it's going to take it much farther.
Definitely. I mean, we've gotten preliminary pricing from these guys too. Their plant is located in South Dakota, and we've gotten preliminary pricing for them to flat stack all these studs and bring them out to California. And that cost to cut them, pre-cut them, ship, put them on a truck and send them out to California is a fraction of the cost it would take to wood frame,
stick frame
on site. It's crazy.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot. A lot of things are turning modular, and they try to, these developers I work with, they're trying to do everything prefabricated as they can. Even if we're doing volumetric modular up above, under the podium, they're trying to do light gauge flat packs and ship them to the site and just put the walls. Like everything is a good modular.
Right.
The only thing that's not modular is a concrete slab. Can't ship a concrete slab. But it's getting very, very interesting. And then another area that we're really looking into is cross-laminated timber.
Okay.
So for a lot of people that probably don't know what cross-laminated timber is, it's where you have 2x4s or 2x6, kind of like studs that you'd have in a wall. But what you're doing is you're gluing them and pressing them together to create like a slab of wood. It's like engineered lumber. And those slabs need to be from 5 inches up to 14 inches thick. And they're used as like a floor system or as a wall system. And they're shipped to the site, kind of like a modular kind of thing, like 2D panels stacking together. And the big change that's coming up is in the mid-code cycle, even in California in our high seismic zone, is that they're going to allow CLT wood to be used up to 240 feet. So you can do a 24-story building with wood floors and mass timber wood columns now, which is really, really great. They've been doing it in Europe for a while, but it's really come to the United States, and we can start seeing them in LA now. And some have been done up in Washington, up in Canada, and there's one that's going online in Portland. That's going to be 12 stories. But you're seeing them a lot up in Oregon because there's a factory up there. But they also are used a lot, are trying to be used a lot recently, coming up in custom residences. There was like a New York Times article that featured a house that did CLT. There's a very, very kind of great look to it, very good aesthetic of seeing all that wood and just having that warm wood inside a residence. And we got approached by some definitely a good amount of architects about using CLT in custom residences, and the fact that it is modular. I think the industry is kind of waiting for more factories to come closer. But it's a very, very great product, and it's very eco-friendly.
Yeah, talk about that. Talk about the environmental kind of benefits of using it. Yeah,
so wood actually absorbs carbon over its life cycle. So this even takes less carbon to create a wood building. So it's like by far the most environmental friendly building material. And so we try to use wood as much as we can over steel or concrete. And CLT is definitely going to be helping that environmental impact.
Yeah, the embodied energy, in a product, right? They talk about life cycle energy in concrete, what it takes to crush the actual, materials and components, the lime for the concrete. That all takes energy. So, there's I'm blanking on the name of the book, but it talks about life cycle, life cycle energy built into a product. And you're kind of, it traces the life of different products through being produced, shipped to the site, on the site, demolished, recycled, and then kind of decomposed, or however it's dealt with in the end. And the amount of energy it takes is kind of unbelievable for just one, for example, steel beam or something like that. It's unreal. So that's why wood is very appealing. So
wood is also very recyclable too, where you could take those wood products and you can create engineered lumber out of them. And finding the different ways to create those recycled wood products. Very
nice, very nice. I want to switch gears and kind of talk about your projects in particular at KFSE, and the things that you've seen in projects that have made them successful. What are those kind of components that make a successful project, and what have you guys identified as those kind of key factors?
Yeah, so this is kind of like really generalized, and but we really see that's the most important thing is the whole team, and having a team that's worked together before, that understands how each one works, and a team that's very proactive and diligent in terms of doing the coordination I was talking about before. And it's a team that's really solution-based, where something might not go as expected, but every member of the team brings a solution together and talks about the solution and finds the best solution moving forward. It sounds maybe a little hokey and go-spirited, but it's really the most important thing. And having that team that's worked together. So like when you start a project or you're hiring on consultants for a project, having a team that's worked in that sector and worked well together. Like a lot of the best developers and project managers that we know, they're all about assembling the right team.
Right.
That's their secret to success. So clients that are good, proactive, know the space they're working in, and work well together.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's many individual people that work on one project, but the kind of attitude, the resiliency, the obviously knowledge base, but there's many components that can make someone successful as an individual, and then you bring a bunch of those similar type people together to a project, and it's just going to really snowball.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying with solutions based, right? I think we've all worked with people in a team where there's that one specific person or group of people that are bringing the issues to the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they don't kind of take the next step and say, hey, here's the issue. This is what we've done to solve that issue. Here's the solution that we can do. This is what I would recommend. And when you have different people with different expertises that are bringing the solutions to the table, that takes a lot of pressure off of, us, number one, as the architect, and oftentimes we're kind of leading the project. We rely on the engineers to come up with those solutions because we don't often have that dialed in, super kind of expertise on how a structural system would work. That's you guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you guys come up with a great solution and present it to us. It's like that's what makes a project successful.
Yeah. Well, even at that, it's like the architect, knows how they can modify or manipulate their design, and they could be like, oh, I can introduce this element here that might be able to solve that solution. Where we're thinking like, oh, that's a very big impact to the architecture. I don't know if we could introduce that element. It might be very large, but it also comes to you working with us. Like, here's what I can do to help you and help the situation. We work together to get it done, and not having kind of a discipline that's like, okay, this is our work, that's your work.
Yeah.
You have to in my position, certainly as a principal project manager, I have to know a lot about the other disciplines too.
Definitely.
Figure out how we work together and how we could find solutions together.
Yeah, you have to anticipate what the other guy's kind of thinking or what the different teams are thinking, right? And that I think that only comes from experience, because you know what the structural engineer is going to come to the table with at the next meeting and say, hey guys, this is going to be an issue. You can feel that. I think it's always difficult when architects will come to the table and say, hey, structural engineer, here's my 30-foot span. I'm giving you 8 inches to do it in. Make it happen. It's unrealistic, right? and it doesn't. I mean,
all you have to think of like, how can we make it happen?
How can we make it happen? Right.
PT slab. Can we afford that in the budget? Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Great example, right? But yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's you've got to kind of have an understanding of what you guys can do, what the MEP guys can do, what all the kind of trades can do from our position.
And someone like listening that might be an architect or MEP or structural engineer, you want to approach those other disciplines, make those relationships with them, and ask them questions. Like I'll ask them like, hey, is there a book that I can read that's maybe more summarized or, not as dense, but is there just a book I can read about mechanical systems? I can understand all of them, and can I ask you questions? Do you want to ask me questions about structural engineering? That's something I've done in my career that I feel has made me like really successful in terms of coordination with other disciplines.
So Derek, can you give us a nugget of wisdom or a couple bullet points for the items that you feel make a successful project, and we'll focus primarily on directing them towards, let's call it a developer or a custom home first time client?
Yeah, so I would say I have two things probably to put towards that. And first, we'll start earlier in the design phase in terms of the selection process. Like I said, you want to put a good team together. And what I don't see a lot is requests for qualification packages. Even like in residences or in smaller projects, you usually get them on much larger projects. But I think like for an owner that's doing their house or doing a project for the first time, or even a seasoned developer, understanding who from that firm is going to be on the team and what their experience is in that sector. Do they have a lot? Do they have 8 years experience in the sector, or they have 2 years? Like you said, there's so much in the industry to learn. Is that you learn through experience, a lot of experience. You can read as much code as you want, having that experience, learning about this coordination item, seeing it come up day after day, or and then mitigating them and figuring out how to mitigate them is really important. So like asking for their CV and what projects they've done, and asking for like every single person that's going to be on the project team to provide their CV and what their role is on the team, because you want to know who's working on your team. Like there's great firms out there, but what's most important is the project manager and the engineer that's working on the team, and because they're going to be working on your project day in, day out. And asking for that qualification package, like we already have that ready. Doesn't take any time for us to provide that when we're giving our proposal. So asking for that from all disciplines and reviewing that, and then obviously taking the advice of your architect, who's kind of like your prime consultant, and knowing that they've worked with them before and how they have, and talking with them about each of those firms, and not just like kind of reading a proposal and based on what you see there or on a fee, picking off of that. You really want to dive into the team and see who's going to know who's working on your project, even give them a call and talk to them. We really don't get that many owners that ever call us and talk to us, mostly on bigger projects. And I think that's a really proactive thing an owner can do to understand the people on that team they'll be hiring.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of go off that's your second point of, knowing the people that are going to be on the team. I think, and getting the CV to an owner or prospective developer, whatever it may be. Oftentimes we'll have, clients or developers coming to us, and they'll say, just hire the structural engineer with what are the best prices, right? What can we get for the best price? And that's a difficult thing for me as an architect to do, and to kind of say, hey, I think that's maybe the wrong decision, Mr. Owner or Mr. Developer. I think that's not the right thing to do. Maybe the upfront cost is a little bit more, but the efficiency that this team works at, or the quality of their drawings, or the fact that they use BIM, or the fact that we've worked together in the past, those are all things that play into the decision-making process for me, but it's difficult to communicate that to an owner. So when we're selecting consultants for our projects, we often, we'll come in here and we'll have a long conversation with the owners. And I'd like to talk through that whole, my mindset with the owner, as opposed to just doing a quick email exchange saying, hey, here's 3 proposals, here's the lowest bidder, right?
Yeah.
I think that's just, I've never had that work out well, honestly. And that not only applies to consultants, but when we're bidding a project with the GC, right? A lot of general contractors can come in and they'll put together a cost plus arrangement in their contract or in their proposal, and come in at a really low number. And it's obvious to me, and I'm sure obvious to you guys, and the entire kind of engineering team that contractor didn't study the drawings. They don't know the details. Because of that low number, you said that's unrealistic, but their contract has set it up in a way that will be advantageous for them to bill the owner change orders, or bill the owner to get the appropriate or their appropriate cost, a profit out of the project down the road. I think that's unfair, and I think the selection process just merits a lot more time, and you have to think about the intangibles that are not just, it's not a budget number, in my opinion.
Or there are tangibles, but they're just hard to see.
That's right.
And definitely listen to your architect. Listen to your architect. They've worked with all these disciplines to the prime. They know all of them. They know the field very well. They have the most knowledge of anyone you're working with during this stage. Listen to them, and definitely thank you for taking that time to go through with them and explain the differences.
Yeah.
And especially right now. I mean, there's so much construction going on right now. People are very busy. Being able to look at the attention to detail that these people are putting into these proposals, that's their attention to detail they're going to have on your project.
100%.
You look at a proposal, I'm not saying I do it on every of them, but most of my proposals are very detailed. I try to lay out the system to you. I try to lay out ways that I can save you money inside and with the system, and not someone that just looks at a drawing, puts a square footage on it, puts a number, throws it out, and looks very boilerplate in the project description. You want to look at that attention to detail, and especially with your contractors. There's labor shortages now. People are working with less, and having someone that is going to be detailed on a project. You see contractors that are extremely detailed and contractors that are not detailed at all and won't send RFIs or anything. And you really don't get as good a built product.
Yeah, I totally agree. And our projects as architects are set up, some of them are set up in a way where we are contracting with our consultants directly. Others are set up, I call it, maybe some of the smaller ones are set up where the owner is contracting with the consultants directly. And in a lot of ways, I like to have, I call it that level of control where we are directly contracting with our consultants, because we have a bit more pull on who we select to be on the team, right? And although there may be some more liability involved in that for us, our firm, I think at the end of the day, it helps us, just kind of give the owner, or have a little bit more sway in making decisions on who we actually bring onto the project team. When the owner's hiring the consultant directly, I feel like we're kind of in some ways just, not that we're pushed to the side, but that our opinion on the particular engineers, it doesn't have as much merit, which is unfortunate.
I 100% agree with that. And one thing about that too is usually when you're contracted through the architect and they're the prime in that contract, usually there's an allotment in the architectural proposal for coordination.
Right.
So there's a fee put on that, a percentage of fee for the architect to coordinate between the disciplines. And a lot of times when we're contracting with the owner or developer, the developer hasn't established that coordination process with the architect, that's some of their scope. And so the coordination falls so much short in those projects.
Yeah.
When you have an architect that's getting paid to coordinate, the project is so much better. And not that they're getting paid, because a lot of times they'll coordinate more. They will coordinate, but it's the fact that it's their responsibility to make sure, and it's in their contract to make sure that all these disciplines are coordinated, and you get a way better product.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even speak to that other scenario we were talking about where the architect isn't coordinating.
We've seen it. Yeah,
to me, that just is just a huge red flag. And I mean, I think owners, all have different levels of expertise, but there are definitely some that can come in to the equation and feel like they can do the coordination, but I don't think it's going to be as tight and as kind of comprehensive as an internal architecture team doing it ourselves. So
yeah, I mean, even with that said, with every contract we had, specifically with a developer or owner, where the architect wasn't hired or wasn't scoped to do all that coordination between all disciplines, I never had an owner do that coordination.
Yeah.
So we try
to do it.
In those So in those cases, what we're doing, we coordinate as best as we can with the architect. But the architect who's understanding how the whole building's going together, they know more about MEP than we even do.
Right.
And they're taking the MEP drawings first. They're reviewing them. They're making comments, providing them to us to make sure everything's very clear to us. And they'll even give us we talked to MEP, or we've even worked with MEP, or we know this system, and we could maybe make these adjustments to help your structure.
Right.
Instead, in the other scenario, someone will just shoot me an MEP drawing, just all these lines, and they're like, coordinate this, right?
Right.
And we'll do layovers and do the best that we can in coordinating it, but it really helps having the knowledge of the architect and what can be modified to help better coordinate.
Yeah, I mean, we've had we've had younger people come into our office and intern, and I feel like for some reason I feel like this may be more common with people who have had a little experience in, let's call it commercial or industrial architecture, but they come into the office and they have said that, at my past firm that I was working with, we didn't even check the structural drawings. We just put it in the set and submitted it to the city. I'm saying, whoa, that is I'm foreign to that, and I think that's not the right way to do this. We often have to go through a little bit of a, with some of the younger people, a little bit of a process to educate them on how to review the structural drawings, just to make sure that these two systems are working together.
Yeah,
so
that's a very good point. So even with experienced developers, we will see that they won't even look at our drawings during the design phase, even if they're very experienced and they understand structure. Or even with other architects or something, they won't even really review our drawings and comment on them. And then they'll come to construction and then they'll be reviewing them and providing comments. And this happens with very experienced developers I know that know a lot about structure. And so what we try to do to mitigate that, and this is actually another nugget of wisdom, is to review the structural drawings before they go into plan check or during milestones, and provide those comments. We call this like page turns. We're like, all right, come into the office. Like I'm very technical or technologically driven, and like do things through Zoom. But like for a page turn, like come to the office, sit down side by side, and let's go through each page and explain to you, okay, why we did this and why we did that. In the structural system, and ask questions. And you don't see that often. And even some of my experienced developers, after I know they know a lot about structure, but they still didn't listen. I'm like, all right, come in, let's do a page turn. I don't want any issues to come up, or even it's not an issue, it's something, maybe they wanted something done differently. They just preferred that way. Like, let's sit down and kind of force them to come in and have a page turn.
And it just takes that little conversation. That's all it takes, for somebody to come in and sit and do it.
30-minute, hour meeting, so much will grow out of that.
Yeah, well, and it'll save you change orders in the field right there, because the first time that they're going to look at those structural drawings is when they're putting their anchor bolts in, or whatever it may be, and then that's when you're going to get all your changes for you guys.
Yeah, and then another thing on top of that is to add for like existing structures. So if you're doing like an existing residence and doing a renovation or modification, what's really important too to understand what's going on and make sure that those drawings are going to be as true to the real conditions that you're dealing with and don't have change orders and delays, is doing exploratory demolition. Like I preach that. Like, okay, if you have the ability for us to open up some holes and make sure that they're as limited as possible to understand the structure as much as we can, our details and our drawings are going to be true to the conditions, as best as we can do it, instead of just making assumptions and then having to make so many alterations during construction for these unforeseen conditions. And that's definitely delays and change orders there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I liked that you guys did on the Pasadena house that we were working on. We did that exploratory demo when we had the guys go underneath there, look at what kind of pad footings were there, look at the the stem walls on it, and as opposed to you guys putting verify in field, right?
Yeah,
that's a good one. We knew exactly what they were, right? And that helped you engineer it. It was smooth going through the planning or the permitting process with it, because we knew that this was existing, and as we go into construction on it, I'm sure a lot of these issues are going to be minimized, as opposed to making wild assumptions on footing widths and things like that.
Yeah, making assumptions is never really a good thing.
Yeah. So as far as moving forward in the future with KFSE, what do you guys see KFSE kind of growing into, or what, where do you see the firm going?
Yeah, we're trying to be a predominant West Coast company, trying to grow on the West Coast. We have an office in Portland right now. We have an office in LA. We do a ton of work in San Francisco, which takes a lot of my driving time up there, going up to San Francisco. So especially during COVID right now, I'm driving up there, like once every 2 weeks or a month or so, visiting project sites up there. But thankfully, I got a car that just drives me up there, so I can just, go to sleep. And not really go to sleep, but,
answer RFIs on the road.
Yeah, answer RFIs, answer emails on the road, and maybe a little movie on Netflix here or there. But it's just driving up to San Francisco and going there a lot and seeing the sites and seeing how the different jurisdictions work. We also are opening up a satellite office in Orange County and just doing a lot more work like all over the West Coast. We're doing a project out in Montana in the Yellowstone Club, which is really interesting. It's like a private ski resort out in Montana. I didn't even know there were such things as private ski resorts. I thought they were just golf country clubs. A really interesting project. It's like $20 million house. So flying out to Montana and, doing the structural observations there is really cool. And doing them, we did projects in New Mexico, doing a lot of projects in Austin and Texas right now. Mm-hmm. So definitely it's always interesting to go and fly to these other places and work with their contractors there and see how they do. One thing interesting about Montana is that you don't have to submit to a building department there. No one reviews your plans. And so
that's kind of unnerving a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely unnerving. But thankfully, we're in a very prestigious, it's a high-end custom residence where they take it very, very seriously. Yeah. And the architect is very, very good, and the contractor that we got is extremely good contractor, extremely detailed, and he's always like saying stuff like, "Oh, I'm sure I want to learn some stuff from you guys out in California." I'm like, "No, you guys are doing better than us out in California. Yeah. You guys don't have a building department." like they're really, really good. So that was kind of interesting, like working with people in different areas and see how they do things. And then so besides that, just trying to get into other sectors and get onto larger projects. Like I said, my most fascinating thing is custom residences, and we work on some really amazing residences up in LA. It's where the real ostentation is, and working on 50,000 square foot houses and very interesting designs. Trying to get bigger and more into that as well.
So as far as KFSE developing in the future, do you guys actively try to kind of bring in the custom homes, or is it, are you directing a little bit of marketing, if any, towards commercial spaces? What's kind of the formula there?
Yeah, so we were trying to really work on our first marketing program right before COVID hit, and then that kind of changed things a little bit.
Yeah.
But definitely trying to get into larger projects and commercial spaces, and we have ties in with architects, and it's just like kind of getting to a level where not that they trust you, but getting their clients to like trust you to bring you in on these larger projects, even if you have worked on them in the past at different firms.
Right.
So there's like that kind of hurdle, and then one thing we've been doing a lot is trying to like get to know other architects by doing like seminars, doing lunch seminars, giving presentations on topics. To kind of teach them things and get to know them and know the way that we work and understand us. So that's kind of like the way we've been marketing, but it's kind of a new thing to us if we haven't really been marketing in the past.
No, that's interesting though. It's more, you guys are more business to business marketing, right? Uh-huh. Whereas opposed to us, we are business to client marketing.
Yes.
So that's something really.
So for you guys, it's all about like getting published and getting people to like come to you and trying to get to know as many people in the community and developers and possibly owners.
Definitely, yeah. Publishing and then referrals. That's old school and just fundamental. But I think that's like we talked about at the beginning. That's the best way to bring on a client. Or they're walking by one of your houses in the neighborhood, and then they go to the building department and pull the set of plans on the house.
That's a very proactive owner.
Well, yeah.
Sounds good to work with.
That has happened, and it's that's
wow.
They come to you and say, I love this home at this place. I saw the plans with it, and yeah, this particular owner was pretty educated on things, but that was a nice kind of way to bring a client into the office because they saw the end product, they saw the quality of the drawings, even before they even came into the office, which is really nice.
Yeah. Probably the final thing for like a piece of wisdom that I would give an owner, first-time owner or developer, is that pre-construction services are highly underrated. They're so important for a project. And what I mean by pre-construction services is having a general contractor on board during the design phase that's giving advice, someone you can ask questions to, and that's like reviewing the projects at different milestones and reviewing and even doing cost estimating and making sure that the project is on budget. That's extremely valuable. Every time we're on a project with a contractor for pre-construction, we just love that. We can just ask them any questions, figure out, is there some way we can do something better? And a lot of times they're going to give you like cost alternatives, especially for finishes is one of the big things. So that's very important. And what's interesting about that is you can have pre-construction services on board and still go to a competitive bid. But one thing to note for an owner, at least that we notice from our experience, is that when whoever's the contractor on for pre-construction services is, confident that they're going to get the project, I feel like they bring a lot more to the table. And it's good for that because they're going to want to modify the design or work the design to how they like to build. But it's an interesting play there with how to still keep that contract competitive.
Definitely, yeah, and that's a great point. We've done pre-construction services on 2 of our projects, and I will always, from that point on, always present that to the owner as our kind of preferred way to go about selecting a GC. Mm-hmm. That will get the question, hey, what's the, let's call it the system for bidding on a project, right? And you have the conventional system where after construction documents are done, permits are pulled, then you go out to bid, right? Mm-hmm. That's, everybody's kind of somewhat familiar with that, but the pre-con exercise is so invaluable, like you're saying. And it's in some ways a little bit difficult to bring on an owner, and pre-con services always obviously they need to be compensated for most of the time, or the GC needs to be compensated for those services at the time they invest in the pre-con exercises and estimates, and that's maybe a little bit of a difficult sell to an owner, but you have to kind of help them understand that on the back end, a lot of the construction issues are going to be solved. So let's say you invest, 10 grand or whatever it is, just to throw out a number on pre-con services, 10 grand, 20 grand on pre-construction services. You may recoup that amount of money due to a, one meeting where we all as a team kind of collectively figure out a different method to install a shoring system, just throwing out examples.
Yeah, and even like looking at finishes, the contractor can look at the finishes and be like, well, this is definitely a more cost-effective finish, and does this work with your architectural vision? Does this fit in with the design? Right. And you can just switch them out as an alternative.
Yeah, because they have very close relationships a lot of the time with their distributors or their preferred distributors, right, of finishes, and they'll have better deals or have contractor discounts. And internally in our office, our interiors group, they do select a lot of these materials, and they get price estimates from the the company or the manufacturer at that time. But at that selection time, that's often, let's call it 6 months, maybe even a year before those finishes are even installed, right? Mm-hmm. When we're selecting those. So those prices fluctuate, they change, availability changes, they may be discontinued, all that type of stuff. So as a contractor, he comes in, he can say, hey, I have a really good relationship with X manufacturer, and I know that I can get this product for this amount. They'll put a sample in front of us, our interiors group, good to go, and it looks comparable to what we originally selected, but at, a 30% of the cost, or 30% less expensive, something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, we've seen a huge cost savings, and definitely on structural side too as well. And understanding like say there's an exterior balcony and we need like a pedestal and paver system, right? And we've researched this a lot, but like, okay, how thin of pedestals can we get so that we can get more structure depth to limit the structure, limit the cost of the structure, and like working with the contractor and like, hey, what can you get, or what's readily available too? Yeah. It's like maybe there's like a manufacturer out in Europe, but it's hard to get.
Yeah, it comes from Germany.
Yeah, and just like, and to talk about those pre-construction services, it's like you can use them to different degrees. Like obviously what I see the most beneficial, but obviously it's more time invested, is having the contractor on board for like every weekly or bi-weekly meeting, and then having them review at like milestones in the project. But like at a minimum, having them just review the drawings at milestones and give markups and suggestions is probably like less time than turn an upfront fee, but still gives an amazing amount of value engineering insight.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's as opposed to having them kind of attend big meetings and things. If you're just sending them the drawings, that's kind of a nice way.
Yeah, and then having them just like available to answer questions too. Yeah. So like at a more limited stage, just available to answer questions and provide those reviews and cost estimating.
What are the most important lessons that you guys have learned throughout your career, you as an individual and then KFSE collectively?
Yeah, I'd say they're not like, there's no major lessons. There's so many lessons every day. Like every week during our like firm calls, we go over a lesson learned. Does anyone have a lesson learned? So it's, like I said, we have 8,000 pages of code or more, and we have so many interesting standards. It's like you're constantly learning through your career. And when I first started, I wanted to learn everything, which is just a fool's errand inside this industry. There's so much to know. So I kind of learned like something on every single project. And just kind of giving like one example is one of like a large coordination item for us is in terms of sliding doors. Like a lot of really like sliding doors really prevalent in custom residence and even retail and commercial now. And for a structural engineer, we're really limited to the depth of the deflection that we can have above the sliding door, above and below, where these manufacturers require only a 1/4 inch of deflection. That could be over a 30-foot span. So it's like almost no deflection. It's like, how does that happen? We have these gravity forces like we talked about earlier. And so that really, really requires like a large steel beam, and then like what's the depth that we can get to make it economical, and coordinate that with the architect. You may have a $60,000 sliding door, and you might have a $10,000 steel beam above it. So you're like about 20% the cost of the sliding door. How can we be more economical to save the owner money? And so we always do as much research as we can. So we'll call up the manufacturers and want to understand, like, okay, why is that deflection required? I'm just thinking off the top of our head, we're like, probably because the track would pinch and it's hard to operate for serviceability. But one thing we found that's interesting is that a lot of them actually require it for servicing the doors, to be able to take the doors out and service them. And we found out that if you deflect more than a 1/4 inch, some of these door manufacturers don't even warranty the door anymore. So that becomes, very important to make sure that, one, you are designing for that, and so that, you don't have a door system that's not warranted. So then we're like, okay, well, is there any way that we can improve upon that deflection, get more deflection to bring the cost of that steel beam down? And so some manufacturers, very limited amount, have these things called deflection tracks, which can get you up to 1 inch of deflection, right?
Yeah. Are you talking about kind of slip tracks in the head?
Just these like kind of deflection tracks that let the panel slip down
right
over, but doesn't affect the pinching of the panel or the serviceability.
Yeah.
And so we can take that $10,000 beam now and make that, a $3,000, $4,000 beam, save the owner money there. And so with those, those proprietary deflection tracks, we looked at, can we custom build, detail deflection tracks at a light gauge, and creating those custom details that maybe save money over the proprietary deflection tracks. But then there's even more coordination there. It's just always a rabbit hole, where it's like, okay, well, how deep do these deflection tracks need to be? Does the architect have the drop ceiling or the space to include these deflection tracks to have this seamless frame underneath the ceiling?
Right.
So just like every single time you get a new lesson like that, new coordination item, can you make this better and make this more cost effective? And you go through those day in, day out, and it's just always a new thing to learn and do.
Yeah, I know. On that note, with the sliders, the sill track, all right, of a lot of these new sliding door systems, you have to do the recess in them if you want this kind of flush sill transition.
Yes,
so that's one of the big things that we work with you guys on. Is, hey, can we notch out 4 inches on the edge of our slab because our sliding door assembly needs to go in there? Then what's the width of that notch out? How many panels do we have? Is this a pocket? Does this need to go back in the wall? All that kind of stuff that I think is critical to making a custom home. To fine-tuning in the details of a custom home, it's super important for you guys to know. And from working with you guys, it's pretty evident that you guys are aware of that. But with other engineers, they're not even accounting for recesses in structural slab and things like that. They're foreign to these newer systems that are out on the market, whereas I think you guys are kind of privy to a lot of these things.
Thank you. Yeah, and adding on to that, it's really a dance there, because like you say 4 inches for that, and maybe that's because the contractor wants some flexibility and to work with that system so they don't run into an issue, right? But that 4 inches may be a lot for the structure, and maybe you're going to have to have some steel beams or something. Like, well, can we get 2 inches to work? And having to dance with the contractor what they feel comfortable with and what we can do to limit the cost of the structure. Or if maybe it doesn't matter compared to the cost of structure, then we'll give them that flexibility and give them the 4 inches.
Yeah. So Derek, as you kind of progress through your career, I'm sure you've kind of felt yourself being more involved in the business side of things and management, as opposed to kind of in the weeds with the engineering and design of the daily grind. How's that kind of, if that's the case, how's that transition been for you and the firm?
Definitely the business transition is a huge change. Like I said before, like, I don't have any business training, and it's kind of trial and error and learning there. And it's definitely, you get pulled in so many directions now, where you're trying to work through review, and then you got these billing questions with your AR department and getting pulled in multiple directions. And definitely there's a lot less design than early in your career, but I try to do one project all by myself, or like maybe once a year.
All right.
Completely stay in it. And I always I create, like our whole office does, but I also really push development in terms of spreadsheet developments, and then really getting those projects and getting your heads into it and how to make the design process more efficient and more accurate. In terms of having some automation done and vetting those spreadsheets to make sure they're completely accurate. Still like get our heads in the weeds that way and still stay in the career. And then, I review over the code, review the notes from my code. I take, read through all the codes front to back, take notes, and just reviewing through those kind of keeps my head inside the game per se.
Yeah.
But what's most importantly is just training all the colleagues that work with you to, be the best engineers they can be, and then finding that trust in them. When you have to step away some, and more so you're reviewing at large, milestones in the project, and just being on the coordination meetings and being able to like really kind of wrap your head into a project quickly and efficiently if you're not the one that's working day to day on it.
Yeah, that's on our side. That's kind of one of the most difficult pieces of making a transition from being in the weeds of design and architecture to the kind of more business role, is trusting the people in the office and kind of when you're handing them a project, right? And I think that just takes time. As you work through projects with particular people, you see that they can do it. And it's this repetitious thing. You see that they can, accomplish this task or do this, and then slowly it becomes easier. But that's definitely one of the biggest hurdles that we have, or that I've personally kind of run into. And it takes trust and time. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, my biggest hurdle as well too. I can be a micromanager, but I don't have that trust.
Yeah,
it's like I'm spending half the project time is me on it.
Yeah, and really, it's not healthy that's not good for the person involved, nor you, nor the firm, right? So that's the development of the people in the firm is critical.
Yeah, and it's like establishing a program on how to get them to there and following that program. And it might be a 2-year, 3-year program.
Yeah.
But how do we meet that? And it's really important that hiring is so important. Being people on that are just as engaged in you, as interested in this industry as you, and they're going to take the time to, the most I advanced in my career is when I studied outside. Advanced way further when I have a study outside my career, and finding people that'll do that as well too.
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing that I look for when I'm bringing people into our firm is, and this is by no means the only thing, but one of the main things is enthusiasm, right? Mm-hmm. How into it are they? Are they passionate about it? Is this, they're kind of, are they thinking about this on the weekend and stuff like that? Not that your life, you need to maintain balance, obviously, but the passion that somebody can bring to a project will give you a good feel of how they'll be able to develop as an employee in 2, 3, 4, or 5 years down the road. And like you're saying, the program that you put them through in the office is critical for their development. And it's tough to play the long game sometimes when you have to look at a person kind of coming into an office if it's just out of school, but you've got to kind of see or project in the future, how can this person develop? And a lot of the traits that I can identify or like to identify in people, or like to kind of use to make that decision, are their enthusiasm, their kind of character, work ethic, all that kind of stuff. So that's a huge thing for us when bringing on people. And I think it's in a lot of ways it's a better formula, and I'm just purely speaking from my experience, to bring in younger people and to kind of groom them into a position, as opposed to bringing in maybe a more senior person who's foreign from the firm and try to implant them in a position in your firm, because they may not have the same philosophy. They may have a different way of doing things. And not that that's bad. I think there's always the outside influences that can come in and positively impact a firm. But it is nice to develop people into that role. Yeah,
you kind of need a mix of both of that. You want people to come in from other firms that have other ideas, and you want the young, nurturing person. You nurture all the way through, and you kind of have both of them and have them feed off each other as well too. And one thing about the enthusiasm is how do you nurture that enthusiasm? I've seen the enthusiasm leave before.
Yeah,
and it's how did that leave? What did I do that could have kept that enthusiasm around? And for me, that's in terms of giving variety in projects. as well as doing development. Everyone
Right.
gets super enthused. They want to build something better.
Yeah.
How can we build what we have better, and like making them a part of that, and like really nurturing that enthusiasm.
Commercial projects or larger projects, that relationship may be with a owner's representative or a development group or something who, and I'm again just speaking kind of from my perspective, I lose the human connection, and that's why I like working on custom homes, because I interact with the homeowner at the end of the day, the husband and wife, even kids, grandkids, whatever it may be, and that helps you develop the, let's call it, the kind of fortitude to overcome hurdles throughout the entire project, because you can say, hey, we need to deal with this issue, or we need to kind of overcome this hurdle, because you have this family who's sitting in the back of your head saying, my job is to produce this beautiful home for this family.
This is going to mean something for them.
That's correct. Yeah. So that's important for me.
Yeah, on those bigger projects, I try to look at, like, who is this for? I might not be dealing with those people. It might be a community thing or a community space. Like, who is this for? How are they using this structure, this building? Kind of get me more emotionally tied.
Yeah. Well, Derek, that sounds like a good spot to kind of wrap this up. But again, I really appreciate you coming down here and making the trek. Can you give people your information if they want to contact you?
So our firm is Kurt Fisher Structural Engineering. Our website, if you want to go take a look at some of our projects, is KFSENG.com, which is Kurt Fisher Structural Engineering. Somehow we became KFSENG. Everyone says KFSENG. So we just adopted that name, I guess. And then my email is dw@kfseng.com.
All right, perfect. Well, that sounds good. Well, yeah, thanks again, and really productive conversation. I hope that brought a lot of value to clients, developers, and everybody kind of in our world. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think this is. I've never had an experience like this before. I think this is amazing that you put this on. I think it did give a lot of good information to the clients and developers out there. And one thing to say about Mitch and Rost Architectures is the architects that you work with day in, day out, which are pleasant to work with, but there's architects that when you get a new project with them, you're really excited to work with them. And, they're going to make a great product, and they're enthused about the product, the entire time. And that's what Mitch does. It's always a pleasure to work with him.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, that's a wrap. I think we're good.